Joining us today is Denis Campbell. He is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. Also, check out Worldview on YouTube at youtube.com/worldviewshow. And also BookView on YouTube, youtube.com/bookviewtv. So, Denis, the big news was Mahmoud Ahmadinejad no longer in power in Iran. It sounds like good news, but it sounds like there's really a lot more to know as well. So what's the situation?
Well, we're still in a transition government at the moment. Ahmadinejad, believe it or not, is still the president for another month or so. But they've elected Dr. Rohani as the incoming president. And it's been rather amusing to watch the Western media fall over itself, almost like having some catnip here. We're so desperate for moderate leadership in Iran that people are rushing to say that, this is a moderate leader, just as they've done the last 2 or 3 times before Ahmadinejad. And each time they've been disappointed. The book on Rouhani is that, he was the one back as early as 2006 that was mocking the West for, its belief that anything was going to change, and also was in charge of making sure that the nuclear program went forward, and he's been a member of Khamenei's inner circle for quite some time. So to label this guy a moderate is ridiculous, and to label these elections legitimate is also ridiculous. Every one of the candidates were handpicked by the Ayatollah's supreme leadership there, council, and they all are handpicked, and this guy just happens to be a bit more moderate, but he's been in that inner circle for decades.
Yeah, so let's talk about the kind of range of allegations against about the lack of legitimacy to the election. When people think about a sham election, they probably think of it on the voting side. But was that an element, or was it just in terms of who the candidates were?
Well, the claim was that 72% of the Iranian people came out to vote. Now, part one, and of those 72%, 50% of them, so we're talking roughly 35% of the Iranian population voted for this man. The problem was that all of the opposition candidates were left off the ballot altogether. There was a complete shutdown on the use of social media, the use of any media that talked about any of the exiled candidates. And the election itself was quickly decided, as it was before. I mean, when Ahmadinejad won 4 years ago, his re-election, it was decided before polls were even closed that he had won with 72% of the vote. So this is the way in which they handle elections there in Iran, and it's no surprise to anybody.
So talk a little bit about, we hear very often kind of in broad strokes that the population of Iran is both quite young demographically, but also very, very moderate. Do we even know what the reaction is internally from these young moderates, or is that part of the problem, which is that it's very difficult to really hear what the opinion is?
Well, that is part of the problem, because you don't know what messages are being allowed to filter out. Iran's secret police is very, very strong, and they crack down on dissidents. I've been covering for the last 5 years a story about a group of refugees that have been living in Iraq across the border, about 60 miles away from the location of 60 miles from Baghdad and 60 miles from the Iranian border. And they've been under ongoing attacks, even during the election weekend just passed. They used to live in a place called Camp Ashraf. Now they live in a place called Camp Liberty, which used to be the U.S. Armed Forces base there. And they're literally sitting ducks sitting there in these very fragile trailers. And 40 rockets were launched at them Saturday morning during the election to try and divert attention away from what was going on inside the country. This is very classic. This is a play right out of the Iranian government's playbook. And indeed, not tomorrow, but Saturday, there will be a gathering of Iranian exiles from around the globe in Paris itself. And there are probably 24 or so very, very top American politicians from both parties, including people like Patrick Kennedy and Newt Gingrich. And I can't imagine Patrick and Newt being on the same dais. But, the fact is that when you look at these refugees, they've been completely abandoned in our in the U.S.'s attempt to get out of Iraq.
This may be a very long answer, maybe a topic for its own segment, but speaking briefly about this, what's your sense of the effect in Iran of the number of uprisings that we've seen in that part of the world over the last several years. In other words, today and going forward, and maybe in connection with this latest so-called election, do we have any sense that the broader climate in the Middle East will affect the future of Iran?
I think the better way to look at that question, David, is to rephrase it. Will the broader future of Iran affect the rest of the world? I mean, they have been notoriously interventionist bad actors throughout the region. And you can literally look at every one of their neighbors from Iraq, where they have a very fragile relationship between Hezbollah, the Sunni versus the Shia fight there is very strong. And if you look at what's happening on a global political level, the civil wars that are about to break out in this so-called regional conflict are going to be between Sunni and Shia Muslims, full stop. If you look at what Iran has done, they've crossed the border into Syria. They've become very involved there and very entrenched. They're threatening the regime in Jordan. Prince King Abdullah, excuse me, is hanging on by in his fingernails. If you look to the south, to Lebanon and to the border with Israel, they're consistently bad actors in that particular area. Their threats to have nuclear weapons. All of this is part of an ongoing pattern. So the question becomes, will this young demographic be in a position at some point in time to stand up? I'm not certain. Their secret police is very well entrenched. Their military is very, very strong. And it's somebody you don't necessarily want to pick a fight with unless you're certain you're going to win.
All right, Denis Campbell, make sure to check out Worldview Show on YouTube, youtube.com/Worldview Show, as well as Bookview TV, youtube.com/Bookview TV, which will be featuring the Fox News mole, Joe Muto, in the next few days. And we'll be having him on the show next week. So a lot to look forward to. Excellent stuff, Denis. Thank you.
Thank you.